Day 777. Something nearly killed us all at Area 51. As we made our way to the Nevada desert, the mood was light and everyone was having a great time. The change of scenery definitely helped, but I think it was really that we all felt more at home in the vast, open land than at any point back east. I've been paying closer attention to things and managed to spot the occasional bird pop into the sky, soaring through the blue expanse before disappearing back to where it came from within seconds. We decided to take mostly back roads, sightseeing as we went. We took our time, spending a whole day driving through the Santa Fe National Forest before moving into the area known as Navajo Nation. There were plenty of small towns and a few touristy spots, but the big thrill came when we hit Cameron, Arizona, and realized how close we were to the Grand Canyon. "Can we stop there?" Stephen asked, as he pointed at the canyon on the map while we ate dinner. "Only if you promise to listen to everything I say. The Grand Canyon is a dangerous place and we don't need to have any emergencies," I said. "I'll be good," he replied, flashing his biggest smile. I laid awake for a while that night, thinking about how much this little group felt like a family to me. I, of course, missed my family that I left behind in the old world, but I'd never felt as close with them as I do with Lisa, Stephen, and Kyle. Part of that was probably due to work taking up all of my time. It's been a while since I really thought about that time in my life, and it feels like so long ago now. As an accountant, I was expected to work long hours and didn't really get much time at home. That was early on in my marriage, and I think that it caused a rift. I thought having kids would force me to focus more on my home life, but the increased cost of living just drove me to work more. I didn't realize I was burning out until it was too late. My marriage was in shambles and my kids barely knew me when I started driving the truck, and that didn't get any better with me being away from home more. There are so many things I would change if I could go back, but that's not an option. I finally drifted off to sleep, holding Lisa and dreaming about growing old in this world. The next morning, we made our way to the Grand Canyon, pulling into Grand Canyon Village as the sun was rising over the horizon. It was a beautiful morning, and we spent a few hours exploring the visitor center and a couple of short trails as we took in the splendor of the environment. I'd never actually made it to see that park until then, and I couldn't believe I had missed out on such a breathtaking view for my whole life. Stephen and Kyle behaved themselves, for the most part, though I did catch Stephen riding Kyle, pretending he was one of the donkeys featured in the photos of the canyon tours. I was going to stop him until I heard Kyle hee-haw like a donkey and figured it was just best to leave well enough alone. Lisa kept pulling me from one viewpoint to the next, her eyes lighting up at every turn. My heart swelled to see her so happy, and for just a moment, I considered staying there forever just to try and capture the feeling and keep it going. I found a camera and tripod at one of these viewpoints that most likely slipped through as its owner was taking a photo, and I decided to use it to capture some photos moving forward. There weren't any images on the SD card to start with, and the first one I took was a photo of our little family standing in front of the railing with the canyon behind us. It turned out better than I expected, especially since it was the first time I had used a camera that nice and with a timer. We had a campfire and spent the evening watching the sun fade over the edge of the world as the stars came out and the moon shone down. It was the perfect end to one of the most perfect days of this journey. The next morning, we loaded up and made our way through Las Vegas. We decided to stop for a few photo opportunities, and Lisa wanted to gamble on the slot machines for a couple of hours. I was able to procure some money in the form of a card for the machines in the Excalibur Hotel and Casino, and we took turns playing different slots. On one of the last few rolls we had, Lisa hit the jackpot, causing lights and sirens to go off. Stephen and Kyle, who had been on the other side of the room, came running to see what happened, and we all celebrated as if winning $100,000 meant anything special. When the excitement died down, we made our way back to the RV and started heading for Area 51. I didn't even notice it when we were walking out, but Stephen managed to get his hands on a large sack full of cash, and I found him and Kyle rolling around in a bed of money when we stopped to fuel up on the way out of town. With a full tank, a solid check of all the fluids in the engine, and some supplies to help us in the worst case, we set out into the Nevada desert in search of adventure. I'd never been anywhere near Area 51, but I had looked into it out of curiosity and a fascination with aliens when I was younger. I knew the general area it was in, and I used a map I picked up in Las Vegas to help us get out there. As I turned the RV onto Groom Lake Road, my nerves started to really pick up. I knew with almost 100% certainty that no one would be out there to stop us, but I was still terrified of being shot as we slowly rolled through the main gate, past the signs warning of fines or imprisonment. My confidence grew as we made our way further into the installation, with the excitement inside me boiling over as the main base came into view. It wasn't as big as I thought it would be, at least not on the surface, but we were in for a surprise when we started really exploring. There were a lot of things that seemed to be mostly for the personnel, like sleeping quarters and a mess hall, but there were also a couple of administrative buildings, full of offices and conference rooms. I was starting to think Area 51 was nothing more than a normal military base when we finally found some more high-tech stuff and an elevator. The first big thing we found was a research lab that contained some weird-looking suits and equipment, like what I would have expected astronauts to wear. I was inspecting one of the suits when I heard the sound of glass breaking and turned around to find Stephen standing on a counter with a look of horror on his face. "Sorry, Charlie," he said, looking down at the vial he had dropped. "Try not to break anything else. We've already caused enough trouble in the other world." Emerging from the lab, we made our way into another building that looked to be a different lab. It became clear as we entered, though, that the building was more than just a place to do experiments. A small craft standing in the middle of the entrance was the first sign of something odd. While I thought it was just a model, it seemed much too detailed. I can't fully explain, even now, what it was that made it look like a real spacecraft, but something told me it wasn't from Earth. As we made our way further into the facility, a door at the end of one of the hallways drew us in. Kyle started to whine as I turned the handle, and even Stephen let out a little gasp as the door opened. I expected to see another room, but instead we were greeted by elevator doors. There was a keycard lock, and I thought we were going to just have to turn around and leave when Lisa spoke up. "Maybe this card will work," she said, holding out a card with the picture of an older man on it and a job title listed as Chief Administrator. "Where did you get that?" I asked, unable to hide a smile. "It was just laying there, inside the pocket of a jacket in one of the administrative buildings we went through." She grinned back at me, blushing. Taking the key, I kissed her before turning to slide it in the card reader. "Could you guys not do that in front of us?" Stephen asked, pretending to be nauseous as Kyle feigned being sick next to him. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened and we were greeted with a rather large elevator car and music from the 1950s. As we piled on, I looked over at the panel to see that there were only 3 buttons. Ground floor was at the top, R&D was in the middle, and basement was on the bottom. A quick glance at the others told me we were on the same page, and I pressed the button for the basement. The ride took a lot longer than I expected, and I'm not sure if that was because we were going down really deep or just moving really slow. When the car finally came to a stop, we all held our breaths as the doors slid open to reveal another hallway. This one was dark, at least until Steven stepped into it. The moment his little foot hit the floor, the hallway lit up like a Christmas tree, and we could see several doors lining either side of it. The hallway itself kind of reminded me of an office from the 1980s, with ugly brown carpet and those stupid fake wooden walls that were so popular. The ceiling was a normal-looking drop ceiling, but the lights seemed to be something from the future. The juxtaposition of the old and futuristic made me forget where I was for a moment. As we made our way down the hallway, no one made a sound. I tried several of the doors, but they were all locked. As we reached the end of the hall, I assumed we would be greeted by a final locked door, but to my surprise, the handle turned. The door opened to reveal a large room with a row of desks on one side and a large aquarium on the other side. The contents of the aquarium didn't even register with me until Steven's voice broke the deafening silence. "Charlie, I'm scared! What is that?" His voice trembled. "I don't..." Before I could finish, the thing opened its eyes. It was massive, at least as large as the RV, if not bigger. It had a head and body like that of a man, but it had flowing tendrils where its arms should have been, and legs more like spikes. It stared at us for a solid 10 seconds before starting to pound on the glass. I was sure it couldn't break through until a crack started to form. "Back to the elevator now," I said, turning to Lisa. As we moved back down the hall, I heard the sound of glass breaking and water crashing in the office behind us. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't happy. Steven reached the elevator first and started slamming the button to call the car. As the doors started to open, I followed him, Kyle, and Lisa into it, looking back down the hallway as I pressed the ground floor button. The thing was smashing the walls and doors as it made its way towards us, and the doors to the elevator closed just before it reached them. The sound of it pounding on the door and walls faded as the elevator moved up, with silence returning as we reached the ground floor. Moving as fast as we could, we left the building and got back into the RV. No one spoke as I started the engine and put Area 51 in the rearview mirror. We drove straight through Death Valley and didn't stop until we hit Ridgecrest, California. By then it was dark and Steven and Kyle had fallen asleep, with Steven mumbling as he apparently had a nightmare about what we just went through. I don't know exactly where we'll go from here, but I do know we won't be going back to Nevada anytime soon. Hopefully that thing is trapped where we left it, or better yet was destroyed or sent back to where it came from, but we have no way to know for sure. All we can do now is get some rest, or try to, and make a plan tomorrow for where we want to go next. Cal suggested we go up the coast, and I'm inclined to agree with that idea. What kind of trouble could we possibly run into driving one of the most scenic routes in America?